In this session, we're going to look at equivalencies. That means converting between fractions, decimals, and percentages. But first, we need to make sure that we know what each of those things are. So let's look at fractions. Looking at this diagram here, 3 out of 5 of the rectangles are shaded. So I can write that as a fraction, 3 out of 5. My top number, 3, that's called the numerator. That's how many are coloured. The bottom, the denominator, is how many there are in total. Now let's look at decimals. Decimals are made up of 2 parts. We've got a whole number, and then we've got a part that is less than 1, and a decimal point that separates them. So, for example, 3.2 is 3 whole ones, and then 2/10 of a whole. Because our place value looks like this, we've got our tens, our units, then our decimal point. Then we have our tenths, our hundredths, our thousandths, and so on. Percentage is the number of parts per 100. So it's similar to a fraction where the bottom number is always 100. For example, 5% would mean 5 out of every 100 people. So we can think of them as fractions where the percentage is our numerator and our denominator is always 100. Let's make sure that we can simplify and find equivalent fractions. So first of all, looking at 1/2 and looking in the diagram, you'll notice that 2 of the quarters take up the same amount of space as a half. That's because they're equivalent. So I can simplify 2 quarters to get 1/2. As long as I do the same thing to the top as I do to the bottom, then I haven't changed the fraction's value. For example, if I take 1/3 and I wanted to make it out of 9, I just look at what I've done to the bottom. From 3 to 9, I've times by 3. So I need to do exactly the same to the top. And that means I've not changed its value. So 1/3 is equivalent to 3/9. Going the other way, if I've got 4 out of 16, then all I need to do is do the same to the top and the bottom. I could divide them by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 16 divided by 4 is 4. So 4 out of 16 is equivalent to 1/4. So let's look at some of the equivalencies. Let's go from fractions to percentages first of all. We've already said that these two have a link because a percentage is just a fraction out of 100. So if I'm given a fraction to start with, for example 1/5, I want to look at how I can make that bottom number 100 to get my percentage. So to get from 5 to 100, I've multiplied by 20. But I need to do that to the top as well. So 1 times 20 is 20. So 20 out of 100. Now that just means 20%, because my bottom number is now 100, so I've made it a percentage out of 100. Let's look at going the other way. Let's start with a percentage of 45%. Let's write that as 45 over 100. It's now a fraction, but it's not a fraction in its simplest form. So let's try and simplify it. I could divide both things by 5. 45 divided by 5 is 9, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 45% is equivalent to 9 over 20. Now let's look at fractions to decimals. What you've got with a fraction is a number, a line, and another number. And this line simply means divide. It means out of. It's 4 out of 5. So all I'm going to do to change it to a decimal is divide. I'm going to do 4 divided by 5, which is 0.8. And that one's done. If I want to go the other way, then I need to look at the place value. For example, 0.55. 5 is my tenths, and 5 is also my hundredths. So I've got 55 100ths there, which I can write as a fraction, 55 over 100. But remember, it's important that we simplify. So let's divide both things by 5. 55 divided by 5 is 11, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 0.55 is the same as 11 out of 20. Percentages to decimals. A percentage is just a number out of 100. So 35%, if I wanted to make that a decimal, all I'm going to do is divide by 100 to get 0.35. Similarly, 3%, divide it by 100, 0.03. And now it's a decimal. So to go the other way from a decimal to a percentage, we just do the opposite of dividing by 100. That means we times by 100. So 0.27 times by 100 gives us 27%. And 0.08 times by 100 gives us 8%.